Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Tucker Perkins. He is the CEO at the Propane Education and Research Council. And we're going to talk about that and find out exactly what is that council, what do they do, and what are they about. We're also going to talk about the use of propane in the material handling industry and the warehousing industry, and dive specifically into the sustainability aspect of that as we look at different energy options that we can utilize within the material handling industry as well. So, Tucker, welcome to the show today. How are you?
Kevin, thanks for having me. This is a really important topic to us, and so we're looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Definitely happy to have you on. Happy to definitely learn more about this myself as well. And definitely, very interested to talk about the sustainable and the renewable aspect of the propane as well. But before we get into all of that, why don't you give us, for those that are not familiar with the Propane Education and Research Council, kind of give us the high level, what it is that council is and what it is that you guys do.
Yeah, I might start by talking about what we don't do, because our industry is fortunate enough to have two organizations. One's the National Propane Gas Association, and they're really responsible for codes and standards and lobbying the government and helping, with that side of it. The Propane Education and Research Council, and we'll call that PERC from here on out, is really tasked to represent the users of propane. So whether it's a farmer or a builder or a homeowner or a forklift operator or the company for which he works, we really are thinking about how they use propane and how to help them use it better, how to make machines better. And then the other part of ours is really all about safety and training. We want to make sure that not only is our industry well-trained and prepared to do the installations they need to do, but that operators are fully prepared in how to deal with propane safely, whether it's on a forklift or when you go to the refill location to refill your 20-pound cylinder. So those two things, safety and training, and then really innovation around the appliances is what we do. And probably nowhere has that been more important than it's been the last 4 or 5 years, as we really begin to rethink how propane fits in this environmental conversation.
Interesting. And I think it's a great thing to be able to focus on that safety and the education aspect as well, which we're going to get educated a little bit today, I think, on propane from you. So I'm curious, as we, you talked about, obviously there's multiple industries and even from just a consumer aspect as well that utilize propane in different applications. So talk to us specifically about the material handling warehouse type of application. You mentioned forklift operators in there. Talk to us about, how is propane utilized in material handling, and where is that good fit for propane in that industry?
Well, if you think about material handling in traditional sense, it's really been about the forklift. And there was a time perhaps when forklifts were diesel or gasoline or propane or electrical. And now we're really in a world where 99% of those are either electric or propane. Really not that many gasoline forklifts. And I think as we even think about the future, we'll probably take most of the diesel forklifts and they'll become propane. So we're quickly becoming a two fuel, society when it comes to material handling. If we do think a little bit beyond just forklifts and we think about the distribution centers, a lot of activity for us there with material handling as it relates to ports, think straddle carriers, think port tractors, and power generation. 5 years ago, I think we identified that distribution centers probably just didn't have adequate access to electricity for what some of their needs are going to be. And we're seeing it now as we really rethink battery electric vehicles and the charging demands. Certainly ports are kind of electrical starved. So really two big segments for us. One, material handling as it relates to an improved internal combustion engine. And then the other would be kind of the sidebar things, power generation and other equipment. We're really attacking anywhere people are thinking about using diesel fuel. Okay. We're trying to attack that. Diesel fuel has gotten expensive. It's really cumbersome to store and use. Right. The emissions controls are really expensive and getting more so. So we're really trying to position propane, if you will, as the modern replacement to diesel fuel and a really strong alternative to even electric if we really are honest about what makes our electricity. So as we start thinking about scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, we really have a great story to tell about using conventional propane in a material handling application, specifically fork trucks. And if we think down the road a bit, and we start now introducing renewable propane, maybe zero carbon, maybe negative carbon renewable propane, the story just gets more and more solid to continue using propane in your forklifts.
Very interesting and definitely good in-depth explanation there of how it's utilized. I'm curious too on the power generation side. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? You mentioned electric vehicles in there. I mean, are people able to utilize propane to create electricity that can then charge electric vehicles? Is that what you're saying? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we're seeing more and more of that, and it's interesting, Kevin. If you really were behind the scenes, so many places that are trying to maintain, this sense of awareness of the environment, yet at the end of the day, they revert to using diesel powered generators. It happens every day at rock concerts or festivals. And now we're seeing, particularly in locations that have made the decision they want to go with battery electric vehicles, but they don't have the adequate infrastructure. And so we're involved really around the country now in using what I think is at least far better than using diesel generators, using propane powered generators. Sometimes they're stationary, quite often they're mobile, but we're seeing more and more acceptance of using propane powered generators to provide the needed infrastructure around electricity. As you and I think about material handling, we certainly don't need to do that. And I think, if anything, the conversations that we've had over the last couple of years in California is California really took that next step, saying, let's outlaw internal combustion engines. Right. It's really helped crystallize the argument. And people that I didn't expect to hear being pro-propane have become very loud in talking about propane. Really? Because they see the value, right? They see, one, it's there for them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no concerns about recharging. It meets their duty cycle. And in so many cases, if we're really intellectually honest about how we make electricity, in many cases, it offers a lower carbon intensity, which is really what it's all about, right? You got to be able to afford the solution. The solution should be good for the environment. It certainly should be good for the health of your workers. And what we see is that propane is doing that in the distribution centers around this country.
Very interesting. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious too, as we look at that, and you've mentioned kind of the environmental aspect here a couple times. Let's talk about that and talk about, this concept of the sustainability and reducing emissions. And there's, a lot of talk about different types of fuel sources for, not only in our everyday lives, but especially in the material handling side. And, how do we look at what's powering our forklifts? And there's a lot of different things that are coming kind of to the forefront and being talked about. But where does propane fall within that conversation? Because I think traditionally, the average person might not think that propane is like an alternative fuel solution to get away from that, right? Because it's still kind of considered a gas or a fuel by understanding. But where does it fall within that sustainability discussion?
Yeah, I think the narrative that's out there has been that we just have to get rid of fossil fuels, and anything that is a fossil fuel is bad, and anything that's electrical is good. And what I think people forget to remember, is that electricity is not even a fuel, right? It's a way of conducting energy. So, if electricity were to come from hydroelectric, as it does perhaps in Vermont or in strong parts of the Pacific Northwest, electricity can be very clean. If electricity comes from burning coal, as it does in Kentucky and Montana and Wyoming and so many other places, then electricity in and of itself is quite dirty in this carbon conversation. So, and the truth is, what we find across the country is about 65% of the country would be advantaged by using more propane and using less electricity. Because today, 60% of the grid is produced by burning coal and natural gas. And of course, when you burn, it's inefficient when you burn it. So it takes more energy to make electricity than it does to directly use it. So in vast parts of the country, you would actually be better serving the environment by directly using propane in an efficient internal combustion engine like you find in a forklift, rather than converting energy to electricity, transporting that electricity, storing that electricity, and then using it in your forklift. And at the end of the day, I think, we're going to clearly live in a world where we'll have electric forklifts and we'll have propane forklifts, but you cannot immediately discount one for the other as being better for the environment. And we study this every day. We study it for vehicles. We study it for off-road vehicles like forklifts. And I think the data surprises even us sometimes, how dirty the grid is and how clean a propane engine can be. And we've worked for years. I've been in some role at PERC for 13 years. And one of the first things I was working on when I came here was to make a forklift engine more efficient. It probably runs counter to some people's thinkings, but we had seen that the automotive world had done a lot of things to make engines more efficient, so the emissions were cleaner. And at the end of the day, we knew we had to have an efficient engine. We had to have reduced emissions. It needed to be easier to maintain and it needed to be cost effective. But we knew that using automotive techniques, we could make a cleaner off-road engine. And today, that's exactly what we're seeing. And I don't think we'll ever stop. In fact, with some of our partners, we're working on hybrid forklifts. So the best of an electric powertrain and the best of an internal combustion powertrain. Wow. And that's where we'll ultimately get to settle in on the most efficient powertrain, the most beneficial to the environment, and the most beneficial to the user as well.
Interesting. And so, I mean, in that sense, when you say that you're working on a hybrid solution and you're working on creating more efficient internal combustion engines, I mean, how do you work with the manufacturers of these forklifts to develop that? I mean, how does that collaboration come about and how does that work?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
That collaboration is in fact constant, really through relationships with the Industrial Truck Association. And we just are constantly working with the chief engineers of the different companies, Hyster-Yale, Toyota, Mitsubishi Cat, I guess now Logis next. But, we work with all of the brands to first off, just discuss with them, what can we do together that would improve your service response, your cost of delivery. And through that, it's just a perpetual thought about how to make these engines more durable, more efficient, easier to service. This is a really important segment to the propane industry, right? If you were to survey the 3,500 companies or so in the country that sell propane, there would be unanimity that the forklift market is an important market. Some like to serve residences, some like to serve commercial, some will serve farmers, some serve auto gas. They all like this segment, and this is a key segment to us. So preserving it and really preserving it by meeting the needs of the customers. We spend a lot of time listening to both end users and manufacturers, because we do think if you fast forward 30 years from now, we think there will be fueled material handling be either electric or propane. And I think that's where we will have stopped. I mean, maybe we're talking about hydrogen in 30 years.
Yeah.
We'll see. But for sure, I think we'll be talking about propane. By the way, those material handling units will probably be fueled by renewable propane. Probably won't be conventional propane as we think about it. It could be zero carbon renewable propane by then. And certainly in places like California or New York, New Jersey, places that are really taking the lead in, demanding environmentally sound solutions. I fully expect that, in some parts of the country today, we serve renewable propane into the material handling industry.
And so tell us a little bit about that, because, traditionally, propane is a fossil fuel, as you mentioned earlier, and which would, I guess, traditionally mean is non-renewable in a sense, right? So tell us a little bit about what is renewable propane for those that are not familiar.
I do want to restate, because I'm never an apologist for conventional propane. The carbon intensity of conventional propane is something less than 80, which, as I said earlier, in about 36 states is cleaner than the electric grid today. But, I think I was in California probably 10 years ago talking about this, and they said, well, what's your path to zero? And I said, well, we have these efficient engines. We have this modern fuel. We have a really strong solution. Yeah, but that's not good enough. What's your path to zero? And we took that to heart. And so today we make 30, maybe almost 40 million gallons of renewable propane today. And we use it in transportation, largely on the West Coast, California to Washington State. And we do it the same way we make renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel, from using used cooking oils, some agricultural oils, and anywhere we're making renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel, we're making renewable propane. What's kind of exciting to me is a year ago, if you and I were talking about it, that's where the story would have stopped. We would have talked about how to make it from some agricultural oils and used cooking oils. And I guess the term in that industry is fats, oils, and greases, which doesn't sound that appealing, but it's a feedstock. Yeah. But, today we probably have 13 other pathways, which range from recycled plastics. We're working on a really exciting project with the Illinois Institute of Technology that would actually make propane directly from a whole host of feedstocks like methane. And that's probably the holy grail for us, is to be able to go get streams of methane that today are just flaring up into the air.
Yeah. And
capture them and turn them into renewable propane, which does two things, right? Prevents that methane from going in the air, which is highly disruptive as a greenhouse gas. And it gives us an energy from a waste product that now we can store, transport, and use. So massive shifts over just the last 2 or 3 years in techniques. And Kevin, I'm not really talking about things that are kind of working in the lab or maybe working, these are getting out into pilot scale and commercial scale.
Okay. Yeah.
So very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. That was going to be my next question. I mean, if people are listening and they're interested in trying to get on to this renewable propane, I mean, is that something that is readily accessible for people to acquire and get and utilize within their fleets?
Yeah. Well, I live in Virginia. You live in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And neither one of those states has a low carbon fuel standard. So most of the makers of renewable propane, they actually get two credits, right? They get the renewable credit from the government, that's RINs. So we talk about RINs when we talk about ethanol or other fuels, but there's a RINs credit. And then some states like California, Washington, Oregon come to mind, have a low carbon fuel standard. So today, manufacturers of those fuels are most able to maximize their investment by pushing these renewable fuels to states that have both. Well, every state has the RINs credits, but they're able to maximize their returns by sending it in where there is currently low carbon fuel standard. And that's why you see today a lot of these renewable fuels moving into California, Washington, Oregon. But I think over the next, and certainly we do see some companies that buy it because they want to have that lower carbon fuel. I have personally assisted in seeing that it's been delivered into Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, Virginia, North Carolina a couple of weeks ago. So it's beginning to widen in adoption. Okay. And I do think, it'll be a key offering into the future. And companies that really need an environmental edge and really want to talk about their sustainability.
Yeah.
I think it's where we're seeing people move now. I'm one that advocates, at least, for companies to be open and honest about the benefits of using conventional propane today. And I think that particularly in lieu of diesel fuel, and that gives them a significant sustainable advantage over, their reporting from diesel fuel.
Very interesting, and I think it's interesting to see that it's becoming more widespread too. And I think it's great to reiterate that point too. That even versus the diesel applications, I mean, you're still seeing from a non-renewable propane aspect still a cleaner solution there. So I mean, if people are looking at their fleets and like you said, they're coming to these points where, they want to reduce their overall emissions and the carbon that they're putting out there. I mean, how would you suggest that they go about looking at their fleet and reassessing whether or not maybe they should go with propane versus an electric solution or something else?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love the fact that, one, we really feel strongly that we not only have good solutions today, but that someone that wants to think about buying a modern IC truck, that will be a solution for them 2 decades from now. Total confidence in that statement. And so, we really spend a lot of time on our website talking about it at propane.com. We're happy to advocate with end users. If they reach out to us, we actually have a material handling specialist that just stays engaged. And then I would love to think that they could talk to their current supplier and their current supplier could help them. And I think, we're all over the map in terms of what end users' needs are. Maybe they want to have the absolute lowest cost. Maybe they want to have the absolute best environmental footprint. And most of them want to have a mix of the two. And so it is a complex equation and one that's best navigated with others. And we're happy to be a part of that solution. Because I think, again, the California conversation has really been eye-opening to me about the value that distribution centers place on uptime and availability. And at the end of the day, you have to have a low cost of operation, right? I'm beginning to see for the first hand, some companies are leaving California, I think, because they know it's just not where they can offer the lowest cost of service. But it is important for employee health, community health, and environmental health. And so a really complex set of equations, but one that doesn't naturally exclude propane. I think if we're really, again, intellectually honest about all the inputs, it often puts propane in even a more favorable light. Then you add in more efficient engines, add in renewable propane or renewable propane blends, the equation gets even more compelling.
Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting to see kind of the diversity that you can come up with in terms of your energy options. And I think as you pointed out here, like what is really clean energy if we go all the way back to the source and take a look at that. And obviously it seems like, propane is on the table as one of those options that could be more environmentally friendly as an option for you, as utilizing them within your material handling operation. So, I mean, really interesting to dive into this topic and also really interesting to learn about the renewable propane as well. I mean, I think that's something that would be very interesting to see as that becomes more widespread. And as you mentioned, seeing more ways to capture things that we can utilize to create that renewable propane, I think would be really interesting to see how that develops. So really much appreciate you coming on the show here, Tucker, and talking to us all about propane, which I guess is your specialty, right? So very interesting to learn about PERC as well. If people are interested in learning more about propane itself or PERC in general, what is the best way to do that?
We spend a lot of time on our website trying to make it a place for people who want to learn about the environmental benefits or who want to learn about specific features and benefits like material handling. And that website's propane.com. And from there, I think we can open up your eyes to the environmental benefits, reach out to contact us if you want more information. And it's a conversation that we really enjoy having with interested parties.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So, Tucker, I want to thank you once again for your time on the show today. Very interesting stuff.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.